Caleb Williams goes first overall to the Chicago Bears. Pete Prisco, what's your grade?
A-. Look, I like the kid. I think there's some flaws in his game. I would have went in a different direction. You know that. But he's got a ton of talent, and he's going into a great situation. A- is the grade.
Rick, our buddy Pete Prisco has an A- for Caleb. Is that a little harsh for one of the best players that we've seen in a long time at the quarterback position?
Of course it's harsh. This is an A+. This is going to be a franchise game-changing quarterback for them. He's one of the most unique playmakers I've seen outside the pocket. His release, his ability to give different arm angles reminded me a lot of Aaron Rodgers, what I talked about earlier. And I think he's going to be a game changer for the Chicago Bears.
Pete was alluding to the fact that he would have taken Jaden Daniels there perhaps. No such luck. Chicago gets their quarterback in Caleb Williams. No player made greater strides than Jaden Daniels. What is your grade for this pick?
I gave it an A. I think this is a great situation for him. They have a lot of talented players on the outside. It's a new owner, a new coach, a great situation for a young quarterback, and I think he's going to be a big-time player both with his legs and throwing the football. The grade is an A.
Pete gives him an A, Rick. I think the situation is good. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great pick for the Commanders. It fit what Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, does. He's worked with Kyle Murray, so he knows all these types of quarterbacks, how athletic they are, how to utilize them. So I think this is a great matchup. And as you said earlier, this guy probably made the biggest strides from 2022 to 2023.
Thank you, Rick. The Heisman Trophy winner is headed to Washington. They took Drake May, one of the youngest quarterbacks in this class. What's the grade for the New England Patriots?
I gave it a B. And again, I like Drake May. I just think there's going to be a little process of him fine-tuning his mechanics. The mechanics waned last year. He wasn't the same quarterback. It's going to take him a little time. But in the end, he is one of those prototypical walk in the room, look like a quarterback, big, tall, and can throw it from the pocket. So I give it a B.
I actually think that grade's accurate, Rick. The B makes sense. His footwork was all over the place last year, Drake May. Is it a situation where he has to sit for a little bit?
Yeah, no, and he's going to a great situation in New England. They signed Jacoby Brissett. That'll be a great quarterback to learn from. They don't have to throw him in right away. We were down at his pro day. He had an outstanding pro day. When you watched the 22 tape, you were very impressed and thought maybe he might be the overall #1 pick. This year he took a step back. They didn't have the same talent around him, but I think this is a great pick for the New England Patriots.
And it makes sense for New England not having that talent around him because now they need to go out and get some wide receivers, maybe some offensive tackle help. They got the quarterback situation taken care of. They didn't trade down. Drake May is their quarterback in New England. Marvin Harrison Jr.
Well, I don't think he's the best wide receiver in the class. I think Malik Neighbors will be, but they're both going to be great players. I'm splitting hairs. I gave this a B+ because I would have taken Neighbors in this spot, but Marvin Harrison is talented, big, strong, can get down the field. B+ is the grade.
All right, Pete, gives us a B+ here. Rick, you were all about competing. We didn't see Marvin compete in the pre-draft process. Do you care?
Yeah, I do a little bit,
Okay.
But I do think he's going to be a great receiver. Like I said, he reminds me a lot of Larry Fitzgerald. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl caliber receiver. I think that his ability to go up and get the ball, his ability to run after the catch is underrated.
Yep.
He didn't run the 40. They say he ran 22 miles an hour, whatever that means on the GPS tracking system. I didn't like the way he handled the pre-draft process, but he's going to be a great NFL receiver.
Rick may not have liked it. You know who did like it, Rick? Kyler Murray, because now he has Marvin Harrison to throw bombs to all next season for the Arizona Cardinals. No trades yet. Pete, the Chargers decide not to go with the right tackle, which they need. They go with left tackle Joe Alt, arguably the best offensive tackle in this class. What's your grade?
Yeah, look, he's a great player at left tackle, but now what do? Do you transition him to the right side, or are they going to move Slater to the right side? Slater's a all-pro left tackle. It makes no sense to me. I probably would have gone in a different direction. I probably would have taken J.C. Latham, so the grade is a B. I like the player. I just really unsure about the fit.
I think Pete's onto something too, Rick. So you have on the left side Rashawn Slater, first-round pick. Now you draft another left tackle, and the question becomes, how do you sort this out? Because you still have needs on the right side.
Yeah, I'm sure during their draft meetings they talked about this, and if we do get an opportunity to take Joe Alt, which was going to be an offensive lineman all the way now, and I think they know they're going to be able to get a receiver later on in the draft as the draft proceeds. But you have two left tackles. Which one's going to move over to the right? If they put Joe Alt over to the right side, keep him there so he can get adjusted to the right side of that offensive line.
Would you have taken J.C. Latham here instead?
I like J.C. Latham because of the run blocking, because I think he's the most explosive run blocker. So I agree with Pete. Actually, J.C. Latham's a better fit, but Joe Alt may be the top player on their board. They went with their board instead of just a need.
We know that Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball, and Joe Alt is going to help accomplish that. Justin Herbert, happy? We'll find out. No drama here in that the Giants didn't trade for a quarterback, Pete. Instead, they get your wide receiver one and Malik Neighbors. What do you think of the pick? What's the grade?
I love it. It's an A+. I love this pick in a lot of ways. They didn't take J.J. McCarthy, which would have been a reach. They stand pat. They drafted playmaker, who I think is the best wide receiver in this draft. They haven't had a great wide receiver since Odell Beckham. Well, they have one now. Malik Neighbors, pick A+.
I can't believe that I'm agreeing with most of Pete's grades here, but let's go down the roster here. Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. This pick makes a lot of sense on a number of levels.
Yeah, they needed to get playmakers around Daniel Jones, and now we'll find out what Daniel Jones is as a quarterback. They spend a lot of money on the offensive line to try to upgrade that through free agency. This gives them an offensive playmaker, an explosive offensive playmaker. So I'm excited to see if Daniel Jones is a future quarterback for the New York Giants with Malik Neighbors helping him out.
More explosive than Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yes, way more explosive than Marvin. I'm going to agree with Pete here on this one, on the explosiveness. I told you that he reminded me a lot, not as a receiver, but as an explosive athlete, like when we drafted Percy Harvin.
You did draft Percy Harvin. You also drafted Justin Jefferson. And Daniel Jones just got a quarterback, and Malik Neighbors, he's headed to New York. Pete, the Titans desperately needed a left tackle, and they go with right tackle J.C. Latham. Sort of a surprise pick here. What is your grade?
I give it a B+. It is a little bit of a surprise, but as Rick can tell you, and he's been around that program a lot, they cross-train their offensive linemen a lot at Alabama. I think he can move to the left side. He's a violent player. Rick mentioned it earlier. He's one of the best offensive linemen in terms of run blocking. He needs to get a little bit more prepared in terms of his technique as a pass blocker, but this is still a good pick for them because they got themselves one nasty offensive lineman, B+.
All right, B+ from Pete there. J.C. Latham blocks out the sun. He played right tackle at Alabama, also played right guard before that. How do we know, number one, whether he can play on the other side, or number two, do you leave him at right tackle and lean on someone else?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they went down there at the pro day and worked him on the left side to see if he can adjust to that. I think when you watch him on tape, he, to me, was the most explosive run blocker coming out of this year's draft. The problem was, does he have left tackle feet? Now, I know he can do right tackle. I know he can anchor versus power. He's susceptible to inside pass rush moves, but I'm sure they worked him out and they discussed this. If they're going to select him, which they did, put him at left tackle. That's where you're going to play him. If not, keep him at right tackle and let's go.
I know you like J.C. Latham. Would you take Olufashinu here instead?
I was a little surprised because I thought Fashanu was going to be a pure left tackle, something they desperately need, and they went with a better run blocker.
Okay, so Tennessee Titans last year took Peter Skoronski. He's their left guard. Now they have their right tackle out of Alabama, J.C. Latham. At pick number 8, Pete, the Falcons need defensive tackle, edge rusher, cornerback, all top players at that position on the board. They went with Michael Penix Jr., a quarterback we both like. Please give me your grade. I am waiting with bated breath.
I gave it a B-, and you know I like the player. I think he's got all the skills to be a good starting quarterback in this league, but it makes no sense to me from that standpoint. You have Kirk Cousins. You paid Kirk Cousins. I know they have a 2-year out on him, so that means he'll have to sit for 2 years behind Kirk Cousins and then play. I don't love this pick for the Falcons. Good player, bad situation. Don't love it. B-.
Yeah, good player. The situation is curious. I think B- is Pete getting soft in his grading here.
Yeah.
I'll ask you this, Rick. When we saw Raheem Morris first time around as a head coach with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over a decade ago, do you know who he drafted first as a defensive player?
Josh Freeman.
Took Josh Freeman. He's a defensive coordinator. They went with quarterback Josh Freeman. Hopefully this works out better. But again, to Pete's point, it doesn't make a lot of sense given that you just signed Kirk Cousins to that 4-year, $180 million deal.
Yeah, and my biggest question is, and just talking about Michael Penix Jr., he's the best deep ball thrower. We've talked about that. He's aced everything that we've seen through this pre-draft process, from the Senior Bowl to the Combine to his pro day. He ran in the 4.4s, which no one thought he can do. But did you let Kirk Cousins know that you're going to draft a quarterback at number 8? Now, they gave a lot of money to Kirk Cousins, and this kid's going to have to sit. But I'm curious to see at the press conference if they're going to ask, did you talk to Kirk Cousins?
Michael Penix Jr. now the quarterback in Atlanta with their 8th overall pick. Kirk Cousins, if you don't know, Michael Penix Jr. is coming to Atlanta. The Bears get Caleb Williams first overall. Now they're back on the clock at pick 9. and they get more offensive help for their future franchise quarterback, wide receiver Rome Odunze out of Washington. Pete, do you love the pick?
You know, I don't love the pick because they have other needs. I think they needed an edge rusher, but I do like it and understand it from this standpoint. At some point, you got to get a young receiver who can grow with the young quarterback. So I get it. I understand it. Now you have 3 receivers. You can put up a lot of points in that offense. They're going to score a bunch. But I think they still need to address edge. Maybe they'll do that later in the draft. I would have taken an edge player here, but I understand the process. B+.
I think Pete's right all around, B+, and also the other needs. They only have 4 picks total in this draft, but you get not only a fantastic football player who made huge strides in 2023 in Rome Odunze, but also a guy who is a culture guy, locker room guy day one that's going to make that team better.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see with the Chicago Bears now with Swift at running back, with DJ Moore, with Keenan Allen, and now you're throwing Rome Odunze. They're going to put a lot of points up on the board. So they're giving this quarterback, Caleb Williams, the opportunity that maybe Justin Fields didn't have with all the weapons they put around him on the offensive side of the ball.
I'm laughing, but do you think Justin Fields is watching this draft going, hey, wait a second, what's going on? New offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, new quarterback Caleb Williams, and now new wide receiver at pick 9, Rome Odunze. 10 picks, Pete. 5 quarterbacks are already off the board. QB5, J.J. McCarthy. The Vikings trade up from pick 11 to pick 10 to get their quarterback out of Michigan. What do you think? What's your grade?
Yeah, I gave it a C+. You know, I don't love the player. I think he's a serviceable quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a superstar quarterback. It's a great situation with Kevin O'Connell and that group in there to teach him how to play quarterback. But again, I don't love him as a player. I don't love this pick. I gave it a C+.
All right, Rick, so serviceable is a word that Pete used to describe J.J. McCarthy. I thought he got pushed up throughout the draft process, didn't end up going in the top 5, falls here to 10, feels like a great situation in Kevin O'Connell. What do you think about this for J.J. McCarthy?
Yeah, and they brought in Josh McCown as their quarterback coach, so I think this is a great fit for him. I know they spent a lot of time and private workouts up at the University of Michigan, so this will fit what Kevin O'Connell does on the offensive side of the ball. I actually referred to him as a more athletic Kirk Cousins. I think he can develop into that. Right now, you don't know because you didn't see him do a lot of throwing at Michigan, but he is a leader, he is a winner, and he'll have an opportunity to show that he is a starting quarterback in this league, being up in Minnesota.
And we've said for weeks that it looked like the Vikings were going to have to give up both first rounders, 11 and 23. Only move up 1 spot, only give up a little bit. They still have pick 23, and that's coming up later. But for now, Minnesota gets their quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. The Jets trade down 1 spot and still get my best offensive tackle in this class, Olafashnu. Pete, what do you think? What's your grade for the New York Jets?
I gave it a B-. This is clearly a pick that doesn't scream all in, or Aaron Rodgers made the pick, because if they would have taken maybe Brock Bowers, or maybe even move down again. Look, he's not going to play right away if they're healthy on the offensive line, so it's a pick for the future. I like the player. I just think that this is one of those situations. If the Jets are all in with Aaron Rodgers, this doesn't scream that to me.
Rick, Pete makes a good point. If we're all in with Aaron Rodgers, who's coming off the Achilles injury, who's pushing 40, Olafashnu feels a huge need, not necessarily in 2024. So what's the thinking here in terms of Olu going to New York?
Well, Tyron Smith, how many times has he stayed healthy through an entire season? So I think this is a great pick. Joe Douglas, was a former offensive lineman as well. So I think it filled a need because I wouldn't really trust that Smith can get through a full 17-game season, and they have to keep Aaron Rodgers upright, and this gives them the best opportunity to do that.
And I think that's right. The wide receivers are off the board, maybe Brock Bowers, but with Olafashnu, you're protecting Aaron Rodgers, who only managed 4 snaps last year. He is headed to New York to play for the Jets. Broncos had to get a quarterback, and they get Bo Nix at pick 12. I cannot wait to hear your grade for this pick.
Well, I think it's too high for Bo Nix. I did have the Broncos taking him in my mock draft, but trading back to do it. They loved him. I mean, this is one of those guys that fit in with what Sean Payton wanted to do. I gave it a C- because of where they picked him. But if you don't have a quarterback, you have to address that position. I get it. It's much like J.J. McCarthy with the Vikings. I don't love the players, but I understand the process. C-.
So, Rick, 5 quarterbacks are already off the board. As Pete mentioned, the Broncos had to have a quarterback. They don't have a lot in the way of draft capital. Are you okay with this pick? Too high for you? Would you trade it down? What's the plan?
I think if I was Denver, I would have maybe tried to trade down, although you had the threat of the Las Vegas Raiders right there and potentially taking a Bo Nix if they move back behind them. So it's interesting to see how Minnesota just moved up 1 spot. So there must have been Denver calling. It might have been the Vegas calling trying to jockey to go get J.J. McCarthy. But Bo Nix, the biggest question mark on him is, can he run an NFL offense? He went through a lot of screens, a lot of quick-hitting throws, a lot of RPOs. Can he adjust to the system John Payton runs with the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about J.J. McCarthy having success with Kevin O'Connell at the next level. Certainly Sean Payton gets the most out of his quarterbacks, and now Bo Nix will have that opportunity because he's headed to Denver. The quarterbacks are gone. The offensive line, there's a run on those players. Every defensive player is out there, Pete Prisco. But what do we do? The Raiders take tight end Brock Bowers. What is your grade?
I don't like this pick at all. I gave it a C, and here's why. They have needs on the offensive line, right tackle. They have needs on defense as well, and there's a lot of good defensive players on the board, and you take a luxury pick. That's what this is. It's a luxury pick taking Brock Bowers. You have Michael Mayer. You got him last year. You signed Harrison Bryant from the Cleveland Browns. This is a luxury pick. I would have gone in a different direction. I gave it a C.
So, Rick, explain to me, if you have Michael Mayer, last year's second-round pick, Harrison Bryant, who played for Cleveland, comes over to Las Vegas. You have needs along the offensive line. You need a quarterback. Those are all gone. And you have every single defensive player there. How are we settling on Brock Bowers?
Yeah, I think they should have maybe looked at some of these offensive linemen, but I think that Brock Bowers was so high on their draft board that he was sticking out like a sore thumb. Understand what a unique playmaker he is for the position. He improved as a run blocker, so this is going to give Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, whoever the quarterback's going to be, another offensive weapon.
All right, they can't get the quarterback because they're all off the board, so they get one of the best offensive players. Tight end Brock Bowers is headed to Las Vegas. The Saints needed offensive line help to go with right tackle Tully Fuaga out of Oregon State. Their concerns about Ryan Ramczyk's health. Pete, how do you grade this pick?
I gave it a B+. Obviously, they have major needs on that offensive line. It's been a problem for them for a long time. It continues to be a problem. You have to protect your quarterback. I like this kid. He's a nasty, violent player. He'll fit in perfectly in New Orleans. I give it a B+.
All right, Rick, the fourth offensive lineman off the board. Maybe the biggest surprise is that GM Mickey Loomis didn't trade up to perhaps try to get another offensive lineman. But Fuaga is a fantastic player. It feels like he's going to be on the right side. Now the question becomes, what's Ryan Ramczyk's situation with the health?
Yeah, and I don't know where he's at health-wise. I don't know what they're going to do because they're struggling at the left tackle as well with Penning. But this kid's going to come in and start day one. He's a tone setter up front on the offensive line. He'll be able to protect Derek Carr because Derek Carr got hit way too many times last year. So I think this is a great pick for the New Orleans Saints.
This was the Saints' biggest need, and they fill it without having to trade up. Tully Fuaga heading to New Orleans. Better, technically sound pass rusher in this draft class than Latu, Pete. But he also has a medical history, and he's the first defensive player off the board headed to Indianapolis. What is your grade?
We see that this fills a need, but I thought there were better options on the board than Latu. And you mentioned the medicals. That's a concern. I know a lot of teams passed him, some didn't with the neck injury, but this is a good player when he's healthy. It's just how long will he hold up? Will there be any issues? I don't love the pick. I gave it a B-.
So Pete talked about the injury history. Had to retire at one point before he transferred to UCLA. We talked to him at the Combine. Very driven young man, had football taken away from him, and a fantastic football player. Any concerns about him being the first defensive player off the board with that injury history?
Well, there's no concern in Indianapolis, so they wouldn't have taken him. So, and you're talking about a neck. That's not a knee, not an ankle, not an elbow. This is a neck injury. So they must have felt very comfortable. But I'll say this, he is probably the most polished pass rusher out of anyone coming out in this year's draft. The question is, how high is his ceiling compared to some of these other guys that were still left on the board?
And I think you make a good point, Rick, because Latu's going to hit the ground running. He's going to get after the quarterback if he stays healthy. This could end up being a fantastic pick for the Indianapolis Colts. Byron Murphy was my favorite defensive player in this draft. I thought he had a chance to be the first defensive player off the board. He lasts till pick 16, Pete. He's headed to Seattle. What is your grade?
Love this pick. I gave it an A. You mentioned Murphy is so talented. And remember, Mike McDonald comes from the Baltimore Ravens. You know who dominated that defense last year? Justin Madubuike. You know who they compare him to? Byron Murphy. There's a real strong comparison there. Love this pick for Seattle. I gave it an A.
An A feels about right, maybe even A+ because he's such a special player. What do you got?
Yeah, no, I would think this is an A+, and John Schneider was smiling as soon as he saw him sitting there. This was a no-brainer pick for me. With Mike McDonald coming in as a new head coach, defensive coordinator from Baltimore, I agree with Pete. He is Madubuike-like traits, but he can play the run, and he can definitely rush the passer inside.
Whether it's Justin Madubuike or Grady Jarrett, the player you're getting in the interior defensive line for Seattle is truly special. So special, in fact, that Rick marveled at his calves in real time at the Combine. He's taking those calves to Seattle. Byron Murphy, you're headed to be a Seahawk. The Vikings get their quarterback, and now they trade up from 23 to 17, Pete, and they're coming back for Dallas Turner, edge rusher out of Alabama. What is your grade?
This is an A. You know how I feel about Dallas Turner. I've been raving about him for years. I think his best football is in front of him. I don't think you always saw his best last year at Alabama. You will see it with the Minnesota Vikings. They know a thing or two, by the way, of drafting edge rushers. This is a great pick for the Vikings.
I don't know what you know about drafting edge rushers. Daniil Hunter, DJ Wanham, maybe you know something. Dallas Turner, you know quite well, talking with him at Alabama, special player. He looked like he was fired up that he wasn't the first defensive player off the board.
Yeah, no, and he's going to have a huge chip on his shoulder, and it's important in Brian Flores' defense that they get pressure on the quarterback. They lost Daniil Hunter, DJ Wanham. They went out and signed Grenard from Houston. They went out and Van Ginkel signed him from Miami. Now you throw Dallas Turner in this mix, they're going to have three great edge rushers up there that can get after the quarterback.
When you're not yelling at me, what do you say all the time? You can never have enough
pass rushers.
Dallas Turner is that, and then some. He is headed to Minnesota to work with Brian Flores. All right, Pete, you got to protect Joe Burrow, and the Bengals are serious about doing that. They add an enormous human being, right tackle out of Georgia. Amarius Mims hasn't played a lot of football. What is your grade?
I gave it a B-. This is one of those situations where it's feast or famine. That's the way I see Amarius Mims. I think he could end up being one of the best players in this draft, a star of stars, or he could be a problem in about 3 or 4 years. We don't know. There's not a lot of tape on him. He hasn't played a lot of football. At times he has looked lazy on the tape. So I am concerned about this, but there's a huge upside. If they hit on it, it's going to be in a big way.
Here's the thing, the tape we do have, though, Rick, the very first start of his career was in the national playoff game against Ohio State, and he looked like he belonged. He'd been playing SEC football for 3 years. He is a special talent, but again, only 8 starts, had an ankle injury last year. This feels about right for me. What do you think for the Bengals here?
Yeah, they got Orlando Brown on the left, Trent Brown on the right, so they don't have to insert him right away. I'm sure he'll come in, compete. I'm anxious to see because of his length, and I think he's a left tackle athlete. If they put him over to the left side and let him develop there, or go compete with Trent Brown on the right side, who's been on and off since he came from New England to the Cincinnati Bengals.
And as Pete sort of alluded to, had we seen Mims play, say, a complete season and be healthy and saw the same signs we saw in the Ohio State game, he could have been a top 10 pick, correct?
Yeah, no, the way he was trending, but also he got hurt at the combine. So there is a little bit of a track record there of is he going to be able to stay on the field once he gets on the field?
Well, if Amarius Mims is healthy, that means Joe Burrow's healthy, and that's why he is headed to Cincinnati. All right, Pete, the Rams finally have a pick in the Sean McVay era. They don't go offense. Instead, they get Jared First, edge rusher, somehow the third edge rusher off the board. Grade this pick for me.
Yeah, I gave it a B+, and here's why. We know they lost Aaron Donald, but they have 2 guys that can play inside. They needed an edge rusher, and I like Verse. Verse is a tough, physical player. He'll step in right away. He'll push for time right away. In fact, I bet he starts right away. He's a good player. I don't think he's ever going to be a dynamic edge player, but I think he's going to be a darn good one, B+.
Yeah, B+ feels about right. I think he has a chance to be dynamic as well, Rick. I'll ask you this. The Rams consistently crush these drafts. I think they got great value with Jared Verse here at 19. What do you think about this pick?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great pick for them, and they have to get pressure on the quarterback, and they hit on the Tennessee kid, Byron Young, last year. They got Kobe Turner, your guy, who also gave him some inside pass rush. Now to get Jared Verse, who to me is the most complete defensive end as far as being able to play the run and rush the quarterback off the edge.
Yeah, you can see many a highlight where he throws tackles into quarterbacks for sacks. We'll see if he does that at the next level. He is headed to Los Angeles to play for the Rams. The Steelers had needed tackle. They have needed center. Pete, Troy Fautanu out of Washington offers potentially 5-position flexibility, play left tackle for the Huskies. Grade this pick for me.
I gave it a B. And this is a perfect Pittsburgh Steelers pick. Get a tough, physical, nasty guy on the offensive line who's good in run blocking and also can pass protect. And remember, they drafted Broderick Jones last year. He's one of their tackles. Now this guy might be able to be the other one for the long run. I like it. I gave it a B.
I like this pick a lot too, Rick. And Troy Fautanu played volleyball in high school. You see some of that athleticism when he takes the field. His favorite player growing up, Troy Polamalu, he wore number 43. Now he's headed to Pittsburgh. The only knock on him is that he plays in shorts. I think that bothers you a lot.
Yeah, he's going to have to wear pants when he plays in the NFL, but love this pick for Pittsburgh because of the position flexibility that he brings. So he'll be one of their best 5 offensive linemen as they try to sort this out. He can play guard, he can play center, he can play tackle. So it'll be interesting where they line him up, but this was a great pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
We know how the Steelers feel about it. Would you have considered Graham Barton out of Duke here?
I think this kid is a better player than Graham Barton.
I agree. The Steelers agree as well. And as Pete noted, Broderick Jones, first-round pick last year at offensive tackle. They circle back, get another offensive lineman this year in round one with Troy Fautanu. The offense needed help on the offensive side of the ball. They need help on the defensive side of the ball. And Pete, they went with one of your favorite players, Penn State edge rusher, Chop Robinson. Give me your grade.
I gave this an A. I love this pick. I mean, you look at their pass rush situation, it's not very good right now. You have Chubb coming off an injury. You have Jalen Phillips coming off an Achilles injury. You need to get a young pass rusher in there. Chop Robinson has the best first step of anybody in this draft in terms of rushing the passer. I love the pick. I gave it an A.
It's a good pick. It feels like pretty good value. No one played with a higher motor last season, Rick. And when I asked Pete earlier, well, what about the fact that Chop isn't as stout against the run as you want him to be? He said, well, you just let him rush the passer as a quarterback.
Yeah, and I think he'll be a designated pass rusher for him initially. I think he'll grow into an every down defensive end or outside linebacker. Anthony Weaver's got to be chopping at the bit for getting a guy of this talent. And remember, they lost Van Ginkel as well, who went to Minnesota. So this will definitely help the pass rush, especially what Pete referred to as both of their edge rushers have been injured.
That's right. We know what they can do on offense with Tua and Tyreek and company. Now they bolster the edge rush position. Chop Robinson headed to South Florida. It sure felt like the Philadelphia Eagles were going to have to trade up to get one of these top-flight cornerbacks. Pete, they stay put. Cornerback one falls into their lap. They take Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. Grade this pick for me.
I gave it a B+. Kudos to Howie Roseman. I mean, he sits there, he waits, he gets the best corner in the draft, and this fills a need. Remember, he might not play right away. They have some age on the outside that's starting to become a concern, but this guy can step in and give them a real lift in the secondary, and they had real coverage problems last year. I gave it a B+.
Rick, he's long, he's fast, he's physical, pass breakup potential. Maybe you want better ball skills, but he showed me enough to be the cornerback one for me, too.
There's a difference between ball skills and being able to catch the ball. Now, he's a PBU machine when you watch him at Toledo. I think the biggest question was he going to be able to step up at the next level coming out of a MAC school? Well, he proved that point down at the Senior Bowl. He was the best corner we saw down there. He's knocked out the pre-draft process with Bradbury kind of on the downside, didn't have a great year last year. Slay getting older. This is a big pick and a great pick for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Ran in the 4.3s in the pre-draft process, was unstoppable as a cornerback in the Senior Bowl, which is hard to get your brain around. And now he is headed to the city of brotherly love, going to be a cornerback for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Jaguars trade down, and they have a cornerback fall in their lap. But, Pete, they decide to go in another direction. They take wide receiver out of LSU, Brian Thomas Jr. Grade this one for me.
You know, I gave it a B+. Early in the draft process, I thought they would look at Brian Thomas. I wasn't so sure as they went throughout the draft process, but this is a good pick, and here's why. Zay Jones, 1 year left on his deal. He's getting up in the years. You know, Kirk cost them a lot of money, and they need a young receiver to develop with Trevor Lawrence for the long run. So I love Thomas. I think his best football is in front of him, B+.
He's a deep threat from day one, and we joked during the pre-draft process when we talked about it on the podcast that he ran more inside fades for touchdown than anyone on planet Earth. That's where you start him. How long until he develops the full route tree for Trevor Lawrence there?
Yeah, I think when you watched him in the beginning of the year and how he ended up at the end of the year, he made great strides as a route runner, great strides as a playmaker. I think he's a red zone threat. He's a deep vertical threat that the Jacksonville Jaguars definitely need for Trevor Lawrence.
Absolutely. Jaden Daniels told us at the Combine that he was the fastest among him, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors. Turns out Brian Thomas Jr. was the fastest of that trio. He's taking that speed to Jacksonville. The Lions trade up from 29 to 24. It turns out that Terry Arnold had been to Detroit one time previously, Pete, and that was to meet with the Lions. He's headed to Detroit. Tell me about that pick.
I gave it a B. I think he's a nice fit in what they want to do. Look, they need help at cornerback. This is a guy who has also played safety in his career. I think he gives them more versatility. He had great success with an Alabama secondary player last year in Brian Branch. Why not go back to the well? I like the move. I gave it a B.
Yeah, this feels like as you like to call it, a no-brainer. You know Terry really well, and you told him halfway through the season that if you don't play better, you're not going to go in the first round. He took that to heart. Here he is. He's going from listening to one Spielman to joining the organization of another Spielman.
Yeah, no, this is a great pick for the Detroit Lions, and kudos to Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell for going defense here. That was a huge need on their defensive side. They traded for Davis from Tampa. They had to let Cam Sutton go because of the off-field issues that he had. So they needed this in the worst way. Their defense is going to be better. They hit gold, like Pete said, with Brian Branch last year. I think they're going to hit gold again.
Terry Arnold's the happiest person here. Is the second happiest person, defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn?
Oh, yeah. Aaron Glenn's going to be very happy.
Terry Arnold's headed to Detroit, where he's going to bite off some kneecaps. We'll find out together. All right, the Packers get offensive line help. David Bakhtiari is gone. Pete, Green Bay goes with Arizona tackle. Jordan Morgan also could possibly play inside. What is your grade?
I didn't love this pick. I didn't love Morgan as much as some. I thought he would go in the first round. Where does he play? You know, there's talk that they might move Zach Tom, the right tackle, to center. Would he step in and play right tackle? I know a lot of people think he can play guard. I didn't love this pick. I think there were better options, Graham Barton being one of them. I gave him a C+.
So here's the thing, Rick, with Jordan Morgan. His arms are under 33 inches. And for people who don't know, that's considered right on the borderline of whether you're a tackle or a guard. I talked to teams that they weren't sure quite where to put him. And as Pete notes, are you going to move your good right tackle inside to add another player? Are you going to put him on the left side where Rasheed Walker currently sits? What are we doing with Jordan Morgan?
Yeah, this was kind of an interesting pick because I thought out of all the offensive linemen that have been taken, he was probably at the bottom of my pecking order, especially with Guyton still on the board, especially with Graham Barton still on the board. I think he has the athleticism to play tackle. The arm length is a concern. Be interesting to see where they line him up. Are they going to put him at guard? Are they going to keep him out at tackle? He is athletic enough to play offensive tackle, but he's so far away technically that I think they have a lot of work to do.
Well, if Packers fans want to be excited, you can watch Jordan Morgan have a pretty good afternoon against Latu last season. Now he headed to Green Bay to protect Jordan Love. This feels an obvious need, Pete. It feels like for Tampa Bay, they get Graham Barton, played left tackle at Duke. His future will be inside for the Buccaneers. What's your grade?
Yeah, I gave it an A. I love Graham Barton. I love the versatility. I think he can play guard, and they have an issue there at left guard. They can play center, where they had major problems last year at center. I think he steps in competes for the starting center job right away, and I wouldn't be surprised if he wins it. I love this pick for Tampa Bay. I give it an A.
This feels like a sneaky A pick all day long. I was sort of surprised that the Cowboys traded down 2 picks prior and allowed Graham Barton to fall to the Buccaneers. What do you think about this pick for Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I think Tampa filled a huge need, especially with Ryan Jensen retiring after all the injuries he has had. They have to be able to run the ball better. And Graham Barton, even though he played left tackle, if you go back to his freshman year, he actually started at center. So this is a great pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got better up front. They're going to be able to run the ball better, which will give Baker Mayfield a better chance.
Right. This is a home run for Baker Mayfield. Protect him a little more. Replace Ryan Jensen. Graham Barton is headed to Tampa Bay. Missouri keeps pumping out defensive players that end up in the first round, Pete. The latest addition, Darius Robinson, edge, maybe even kicks inside. He is headed to Arizona. What do you think about this pick?
I gave it a B, and look, you mentioned the versatility. I think he can play outside. I think he can move him inside. He's going to be a nice inside rusher, I think, at times. And this is a team that needed defensive line help. I like this pick for Arizona. I think Robinson might be one of those guys that ends up being better on the next level than he was in college.
And I think he was pretty good at Missouri, so it's a scary proposition to think that he's going to actually improve. The Arizona Cardinals are having a pretty good draft so far with Marvin Harrison Jr. What do you think of Darius Robinson on the other side of the ball?
Yeah, I think this is a huge pick for Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if he's a pure edge pass rusher like the Chop Robinsons, the Dallas Turners, the Jared Verses, the Latus, but he's going to give them position flexibility. I bet by the time it's said and done, he's a base defensive end. They're going to slide him inside to create mismatches over offensive guards. Even though he didn't run fast at the combine, he plays a lot faster, and he's an explosive athlete.
And we saw that at the Senior Bowl time and time again, and you saw it at Missouri last year. Great job by Arizona in round 1. Get that wide receiver at number 4, and Marvin Harrison Jr. circle back at the bottom of round 1. Darius Robinson, edge rusher out of Missouri, headed to Arizona. Okay, Pete, let's start here. The Buffalo Bills trade out of this pick and allow the Kansas City Chiefs to come up to get 4-2-1 burner Xavier Worthy. I want to get your thoughts on this and your grade as well.
I love it. I love it. All you need to do is get some more speed for Patrick Mahomes. Remember when he had Tyreek Hill? Well, this kid flies just like him. It's a great move to go up and get him and add him to an offense. Remember, they added Hollywood Brown. He can run a little bit as well. They have the issue with Rashee Rice. So why not add a speed guy? I love it. I know Rick Spielman hates it because he hates little receivers.
Well, here's the thing. I had Xavier Worthy going to Kansas City Chiefs in my last mock draft. But the bigger issue for me, Rick, is why would the Buffalo Bills gift wrap a 4-2-1 burner who can win at all three levels and Xavier Worthy to the Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, they may have another receiver that was rated higher than Xavier Worthy, and we don't know that. But now look at Kansas City's offense with the addition of Hollywood Brown, with Xavier coming in, Worthy to add speed to that. I agree that Rashee Rice, I don't know how long he's going to be out. He's going to get suspended by the league. We'll probably determine that right before the season starts. But now look at this Kansas City offense with these two burners and with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. This is going to be a team that's going to be still the probably the winner of next year's Super Bowl.
Rick making bold predictions on day one of the draft. And by the way, they still have Kadarius Toney on the roster, former first-round pick as well. The rich get richer either way. Xavier Worthy is blazing that 4-2-1 speed to Kansas City. Congratulations to the Chiefs yet again. Trade down, they pass on Graham Barton, and they get an athletic tackle, Pete, and Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. Grade this pick for me.
Yeah, I gave it a B. And look, there are some issues with Guyton. First and foremost, he played on the right side. What are they going to do with him? Is he going to move to the left side? What does it mean for Smith at left guard? Does he kick out the tackle? Do they keep him at guard? I think there's some options there. There was some inconsistency with Guyton, particularly on the right side, but I think this is a good, smart pick by the Cowboys. You get another offensive lineman to add to the mix.
So some teams had Tyler Guyton with left tackle ability. He played primarily on the right side for Oklahoma, had a fantastic Senior Bowl. There are some moving pieces you have to sort through in Dallas. What do you think about Guyton going to the Cowboys?
Yeah,
here?
I wouldn't be surprised that they move him over to the left side. And I know he's played on the right side at Oklahoma, but he's more than athletic to move over to the left side. I do like his aggressiveness and the style that he plays with. This was a huge need that Dallas had to fill. And I bet if they put him over at left tackle, see if he can be the starter and keep Smith inside at guard, where I think he's better at guard than he is at left tackle.
Okay, the Cowboys actually get some draft picks by trading down, and they get their guy in offensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, out of Oklahoma. This young man feels like a Ravens pick, Pete. Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson, is headed to Baltimore. What do you think about this grade-wise?
I love this pick. And I know people ping him because he doesn't tackle very well. But you know what? The Ravens have issues at corner. Marlon Humphrey was banged up last year. Stevens, the other corner's going into the final year of his contract. You need a cornerback. Wiggins is the best pure cover guy in this draft. The problem is he's not very big and he's not a great tackler. But you know what? The Ravens always find a way to make guys like this work. I like this pick. I gave it a B+.
I think Pete's right. I think the physicality maybe lacks in terms of the 175-ish frame, but he's willing, and we know he can cover. I think he can get better in run support, but he feels like a player that would fit on that Ravens defense. Yeah,
and you probably looked at maybe they were going to go offensive line, but all these offensive linemen ran before they were able to pick an offensive lineman because they do need someone at right tackle. But to get a corner, and I agree with Pete, they definitely needed a corner. Nate Wiggins is probably the best man cover corner in this draft. The one thing I'll say is that you may poke holes in the run game and run support, but he got much better than he showed in 22, so I think this is an excellent pick by the Baltimore Ravens.
The arrow is pointing up, as we like to say, and oh, by the way, he ran a 4.28, so he's plenty fast as well. Nate Wiggins headed to Baltimore. The 49ers have a ton of needs, perhaps on defense, but Pete, they go wide receiver, and it's sort of a surprise pick here. Florida's Ricky Pearsall off the board for San Francisco. Grade this pick for me.
I gave it a C-. Look up luxury pick in the dictionary. You'll see this pick there. I don't get it. I mean, you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Samuel, you have other guys there as well. Jennings, what are you doing? What are you doing making this pick? I don't understand this at all. It makes no sense. And there are better options. McConkey's a better option. I think A.D. Mitchell was a better option. I don't understand this pick. Don't like it. Gave it a C-.
Rick, I wonder if they were in a position where they didn't feel like they could trade down, or maybe they just had Ricky Pearsall high on their board. In fact, maybe John Lynch liked Ricky Pearsall, but the only person that liked Ricky Pearsall more than John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, looking at him right here, Rick Spielman.
Yeah, I thought he was a very good receiver, very underrated receiver. He can play outside, he can play inside. He ran in the 4.3s, so you know he can stretch the field. The biggest question is, does this end Ayuk in San Francisco? Are they going to trade him? Sounds like since they took a first-round receiver, they're probably not going to be able to reach an extension with him. So I can see them maybe a future pick where they want to make sure that Brock Purdy still has weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe it's a luxury pick, but I thought it was, in my opinion, one of the best receivers left in this draft in the first round.
Let me ask you this. Is this a situation where perhaps Brandon Ayuk now gets traded over the draft weekend because of this development?
I don't know. We'll see over the next couple of days, but if they probably tried to trade him and couldn't get a first-round pick for him, like A.J. Brown, like Hollywood Brown when Arizona and Philadelphia did that. So maybe he's still on the trading block. Maybe he's not going to get traded. But I think they got their replacement, Ricky Pearsall, for Brandon Ayuk.
Well, the 49ers get richer on offense. Kyle Shanahan's happy. Brock Purdy's happy. Ricky Pearsall's happy. Brandon Ayuk, we'll have to wait and see. Ricky Pearsall headed to the Bay Area. The Bills trade down not once but twice. They're out of the first round altogether. Here's who's coming up, Pete, the Carolina Panthers, and they are getting, no surprise here, a wide receiver, Xavier Legette, finally gets Bryce Young some deep speed. Grade this pick for me.
Yeah, I give it a B+. I like him as a player. I know you said, and everybody says he's only a one-hit wonder, but the best football's in front of him. He's a physical kid. He can run a little bit, and you have to get Bryce Young weapons. You have to find out what he is. Give him some help. They've given him some help. They moved up a spot to get him. They've been linked to him a long time. I like to pick B+.
You know, it's funny, Dave Canales had to answer questions because Xavier Legette said to the media that if he were there at 33, the Panthers are going to take him, and Canales had to tiptoe around that. It turns out he was right. He didn't go 33. He went 32. One-year wonder, as Pete mentioned, that's something you talked about when we were on the podcast, but his tape is hard to not be impressed by in 2023.
No, his size, his athleticism, his ability to stretch down the field, that's what they didn't have last year. So in order for Bryce Young to have success, I think hiring Dave Canales as a head coach will definitely help Bryce Young moving forward. And now you add an offensive weapon that can stretch the field. This should be big for Carolina.
We talk a lot about Roman Dunze helping himself with a remarkable 2023 season. I think Xavier Legette's a close second because we watched Spencer Rattler early on and were wholly and repeatedly impressed with the way number 17 played for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, because he's one of those receivers in 50-50 contested situations. He has the athleticism and the size to go up and get the ball in contested catches.
Yeah, no one's happier tonight after the Legette family than Bryce Young because he finally has a deep weapon coming to Carolina. Xavier Legette headed to Charlotte.